The day Speed died, how one jet changed air combat forever. Missile tones screaming in his headset, the Phantom's pilot hauls back, buffet, vapor, nothing. He squeezes the trigger that doesn't exist. No gun. The MiG is slower, tucked in behind a patient shadow with teeth. 30 seconds to impact becomes 20 as the Sparrow won't lock and the Sidewinder hunts Sun. Brake left, too late. A flash, shrapnel, fuel, freeze. The Doctrine said this fight was impossible. No merges, no turning duels, just radar shots at range. It kept happening. Rewind with me. Speed and missiles promised a clean future. What failed, who pushed back, and how TOPGUN rewired combat, that's the story. The missile age myth, speed replaces skill. To understand why that cockpit had no gun, we need to go back to the moment America fell in love with speed. Korea ended with F-86s dueling MiGs at gun range, but the post-war mind was somewhere else. Radar, computers, guided weapons. In briefings, charts trended upward, range, closure, probability of kill. Dogfighting looked like a relic, an untidy habit from a less civilized sky. The Navy's answer was the F-4 Phantom II, born as a fleet defender. Its job wasn't to wheel and slash. It was to sprint, loft missiles, and keep Soviet bombers off carrier decks. Designers left the gun out on purpose. That wasn't an oversight. It was a statement. Missiles made guns unnecessary. A clean nose promised less drag, more sensors, and no temptation to mix it up inside a mile. On test ranges, the numbers looked unbeatable. Against scripted targets, Sparrows flew straight, Seekers stayed locked, and rules of engagement were friendly to a world where a radar track and a confident controller could authorize a shot. The math returned glowing. Pilots were trained to intercept, not to knife fight. Formation contracts were about presenting radar beams, not trapping opponents in the vertical. Meanwhile, the culture around procurement fed a certain kind of faith. Complexity equaled progress. If a system didn't work the first time, the answer was to add another mode, another switch, another checklist step to tame it. Competence became the ability to manage systems rather than to outthink an adversary at the merge. You could see it in syllabi. Hours poured into radar modes, missile envelopes, and beyond visual range intercept geometry. The old art, nose position games, rate control, energy trading, faded like chalk on a rain-soaked ramp. Here's the catch nobody wanted to talk about in those rooms. Test shots aren't combat. Range trials had perfect weather, cooperative targets, and clean wiring. Real fights are messy. Cables chafe. Connectors loosen. Seeker heads get confused by heat, haze, and sun angles. And all of that assumes someone actually lets you shoot before you can see a tail flash. But on paper, it all held. The Phantom's raw speed was intoxicating. 2 big engines, a wall of thrust, and room for a wall of missiles. If the enemy tried to turn, outrun him. If he closed, scare him off with a radar tone and a plume of white smoke. The logic felt sound enough to be fact. And facts guided budgets. Budgets guided training. Training guided habits that would be hard to break, especially under stress. Stakes, they weren't abstract. Doctrine shapes who lives. If you believe you won't ever need to pull for angles, you don't teach it deeply. If you don't teach it, you won't use it when it matters. The Phantom crews who strapped in for Southeast Asia carried that inheritance, sleek airplanes, sophisticated weapons, and the confidence that the merge was history. Meanwhile, the other side drilled in simpler truths. See the enemy, get angles, shoot when close. What nobody knew at the time was how the environment would sandpaper those elegant assumptions. Jungle moisture would eat radar performance. Mountains would throw clutter at screens. Heat would play tricks with seekers. And rules of engagement, written for fear of friendly fire and political escalation, would demand eyes on target before anyone fired. Beyond visual range, promises, so clean in a lab, would die the moment the first flight crossed the coast. Inside squadrons, you could feel the split. The old heads muttered about gunnery. The young hotshots rode the missile wave and trusted what they'd been taught. Maintenance troops, under pressure to keep sorties flowing, fought gremlins in racks and harnesses, swapping black boxes in the sun while line jets cooked on the ramp. Every missed tone was a question mark. Every clean lock that broke at the last second was a seed of doubt. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the briefing rooms. Checklists multiplied. Debrief stayed polite. If a missile didn't work, it was a bad unit, not a bad tactic. If an intercept didn't produce a shot, the fixation was on procedure, not on the decision at the merge. The culture protected the belief. The belief protected the culture. And pilots kept launching with jets that had no last-ditch option if the geometry went south. Get this, some of the most convincing early statistics were artifacts of how the tests were scored. A kill on the range could come from parameters alone. Seeker aligned, range adequate, target in envelope. In combat, a kill is a smoking crater or a parachute. Between those two worlds lived the blunt truth that would only reveal itself over Hanoi. You don't get points for almost. There was human psychology at work too. New tech flatters. It gives you the sense you've outgrown old risks. It's easier to budget for hardware than for humility. It's easier to brief a switchology flow than to teach how to sense an opponent's next move by the way his canopy flashes in a turn. But that sense, call it fighting instinct, doesn't happen by accident. It's earned in ugly, honest training with instructors who won't let you lie to yourself. The Phantom's creators weren't fools. They built the best fleet interceptor of its time. The myth took root above the airframe. Speed replaces skill, sensors replace sight, processes replace judgment. It's tidy, it's comforting, and it was about to be torn open by weather, terrain, and a determined enemy flying simpler jets with disciplined controllers in their ear. While that faith cruised west at 40,000 feet, the sky over North Vietnam waited with a different lesson. Tight merges, hard turns, and seconds that felt like years. Enter Vietnam, the sky that broke the model. Crossing the beach, the radios got tight. Controllers spoke in clipped calls, but the first hard rule waited like a tripwire. You don't shoot until you see him. Visual ID wasn't a suggestion, it was law. Politically, nobody wanted a friendly airliner or an ally splashed by mistake. Practically, that meant the beyond visual range shots briefed back home evaporated over the Gulf. Radar tracks became rumors until a canopy saw a star. To understand why, we need to go back to those rules of engagement. Paper said, confirm hostile, avoid escalation, minimize collateral damage. In theory, IFF would help. In practice, IFF lied, failed, or wasn't trusted. The only truth was a silhouette, the sawtooth of a MiG-21's intake, the barrel nose of a MiG-17, and a number on the tail if you got that close. So flights that had trained to fire at dots learned to chase shapes through haze and sun glare, holding their shots as seconds bled away. Meanwhile, the environment went to work. North Vietnam was a radar nightmare. Limestone cast threw back returns like broken mirrors. Thunderheads stacked in the afternoon, wet air chewing up range. The scope would bloom, then fade. Lock, then drift. Pilots toggled pulse to pulse Doppler and back. The RIOs hunting a stable strobe, while the airframe flexed under G down low. The Sparrow's brain wanted clean space. It got clutter and ground spill. Up high, contrails betrayed you or sun angles blinded seekers. The Sidewinder chased heat, but Vietnam's heat was everywhere. Runways baked, clouds glowed, and a diving MiG could put the sun right behind his tail, gifting your missile a brighter lie. What nobody knew at the time was how well the North Vietnamese would choreograph the ambush. Their ground controllers were not guessing. They were painting a moving picture from radar sites strung along the routes. The plan was simple. Time a climb, slash the formation, then disappear. MiG-17s came in low and tight, turning like barn swallows, pulling inside arcs the Phantom couldn't match without bleeding energy fast. MiG-19s brought cannons and a sharper climb. MiG-21s hit like a thrown knife, fast in, missile out, gone vertical. They weren't hunting glory. They were taking a bite and getting out before the strike package could wheel. Here's where training gaps showed up in the cockpit. US formations were built for intercepts, spread to feed radars, protect the strike, stay disciplined along a route. That spacing turned into seams a controller could thread. The first call, Bandits 12 high, became a scramble to sort 2, maybe 3 groups, each a different type and altitude. Inside that sorting problem, time collapsed. The lead eyed a lock that wouldn't settle. The wingman protected his 6. Nobody wanted to break formation discipline and leave the package exposed. Then a grey blur flashed across the nose. and the merge you'd been told wouldn't happen was already behind you. The Phantom's workload spiked at exactly the wrong moment. The pilot flew the jet and the fight. The RIO worked the radar and the radios. Meanwhile, a MiG pilot with a gun and a turn plan needed one thing: nose on. That difference mattered. When your only weapons ask for specific range, aspect, and stability, while the bandit asks for one-sight picture, you're behind. Crews learned the hard way that minimums and envelopes are cliffs, not slopes. A sparrow outside parameters wasn't a weak punch, it was nothing. A gun outside 1,000 feet, still a gun. Micro moments cut deep. A crew rolled in behind a fleeing MiG-17, close enough to see the pilot's helmet. The Sidewinder seeker sang, then growled, then went quiet as the jet slid against a sunlit cloud. The MiG tightened, reversed, and the Phantom overshot, forced to extend rather than eat cannon fire. Another day, a section got bounced head-on by MiG-21s. The lead held for a Sparrow shot, waiting for the radar to settle. The enemy fired first, then lit the sky with burner and vanished into the vertical while the RIO called, "Break!" The missile missed. The lesson didn't. Meanwhile, the psychological toll built. Crews started to distrust tones, then procedures, then the entire promise. Maintenance did what they could, swap seekers, safety wire connectors, baby the racks. And yet on the line, the talk turned quiet. Don't count on the first Sparrow. Save a winder for the last turn. If you can't sort, don't force the shot. You could hear the shift, from faith in hardware to hedging with experience. This was the moment everything changed, because the numbers started to reflect the feeling. Exchange ratios sagged. Debriefs filled with no-joy calls and lost lock notes. The humiliations arrived not as theory, but as gun flashes and parachutes. Leaders tried to brief it as random, weather, bad luck, isolated incidents. The trend line disagreed. Vietnam had broken the model by forcing every weakness into the same minute. Row that closed the range. Weather that blurred the scope. Tactics that split the formation. And enemies disciplined enough to take one clean shot and live to do it again. The Phantom's blind spot. No gun, no options. By the time the first real merges stacked up north of Hanoi, the Phantom's clean nose turned into a liability you could feel in your teeth. Crews joked darkly that their trigger was a switch labeled Hope. Early Sparrows, AIM-7DE, needed a stable radar track, the right aspect, and a cooperative target. They got heat shimmer, terrain clutter, jamming whispers, and bandits snapping across the beam. Reliability on paper meant little when one loose connector, one mistuned missile, turned a confident squeeze into dead air. Stakes were human, immediate. If the missile didn't go, you had to make a choice in seconds. Extend and come back later, or stay and trade turns with a jet designed to do exactly that. The Sidewinder wasn't a magic wand either. Early AIM-9s hunted bright sources. In an Asian summer sky, the sun and sunlit clouds were brighter than a fleeing exhaust. Crews learned to shade the seeker with the canopy bow to time the shot off the bandit's quarter. Even then, seekers wandered. A growl could turn to silence with a glint of light. Minimums and envelopes cut like glass. The Sparrow didn't just prefer a narrow set, it demanded one. High closure. No. Crossing target. No. Break lock for a heartbeat. No. Inside minimum range, it was a polite passenger. The Sidewinder needed aspect, not just range. Too forward and it stared at fuselage skin, not heat. When geometry cancelled your only weapons, the cockpit felt very small, very fast. Across the circle, a MiG-17 driver needed one picture. Canopy full of Phantom, Pipper steady, cannon walking in. Cockpit workload spiked right at that knife edge. The RIO chased a lock through pulse clutter, toggling filters, calling ranges and aspect. The pilot flew a heavy jet at the edge of buffet, trying to hold a window for a missile that kept shrinking. Meanwhile, a MiG pilot, coached by ground control, pointed and shot. The Phantom could rate, yes, and dive away like a meteor, but inside 2 miles the fight became simple physics and simpler habits. Every knob, every mode switch, every extra second spent coaxing a tone was a second the bandit used to close for guns. Micro-stories circulated like warnings. One crew rolled in low behind a MiG-19, the Sidewinder toned steady until the jet crossed a bright cloud. The missile took the light, not the target. The next pass, the Sparrow came off the rail and fell dumb when the lock hiccuped at the worst moment. Fuel said leave. Pride said stay. Wisdom won, and they extended through flak, skin crawling, the RIO whispering altitudes to keep from eating a hill. Another day, a section leader tried to bracket a MiG-17 for a Sparrow shot. Inside parameters, almost. The bandit reversed hard, the window shut. The leader watched tracers sweep where his wing had been a heartbeat earlier and pushed both throttles through the stop. Bolt-on fixes appeared because crews demanded something they could count on when missiles turned moody. Gun pods, SU-1623, hung under the Phantom like promises. In practice, they were draggy, shook under fire, and sprayed wide unless you were steady and close. Still, they gave you a trigger you could feel. Pilots described the first squeeze like taking a breath after a long hold. The trade was brutal. The extra drag bled energy, the recoil spoiled aim, and the pod's reliability depended on 100 little parts that hated humidity, and gee, you had a gun now. But it fought you to use it. Leaders briefed these as isolated incidents, the kind of bad luck montage every war produces. The flight line told a different story. Maintenance chiefs tracked rack faults and seeker failures with grease pencil charts that didn't lie. Debriefs filled with no launch and hung scribbles. Aircrews carried their own quiet ledgers. Missiles trusted, missiles suspect, geometry that felt solid and geometry that felt like a trap. The trend line bent the wrong way, and with it went confidence. A fighter without conviction in its weapons flies differently, more cautious at the merge, quicker to extend, slower to commit. There was a deeper blind spot no wiring diagram could show. The belief that systems would simplify the fight had simplified the training instead. Crews were brilliant at intercept flows and switchology, but the moment the fight collapsed into raw angles, they lacked reps. Gun camera film from the other side told the tale. MiG-17s forced overshoots by tightening radius at the bottom of the vertical. MiG-21s sliced head-on, put a missile out, and zoomed into the sun while Phantoms tried to clean up a shot that never quite stabilized. Angles beat speed when speed had to service a missile. Meanwhile, something else was happening across ready rooms. A few instructors started pushing merge discipline drills in the pattern, sneaking in 1v1 sets after admin flights. Not official, not blessed, but necessary. If the Sparrow doesn't give, what's your next move? Became a real question, not heresy. You could feel a quiet pivot from worshipping the envelope to managing energy, stacking small advantages, refusing bad merges, taking the vertical on your terms. It wasn't a fix-all, but it gave crews an option, besides extending and praying the next pass would be kinder. The Phantom itself evolved. Later blocks would grow an internal gun, but in those early years, the blind spot was both metal and mindset. The jet had no easy out when missiles sulked, and the people flying it had been taught to believe they wouldn't need one. Vietnam punished both. The lesson wasn't that missiles were useless. It was that missiles were conditional, and conditions rarely cooperated. Until training matched that truth, crews would keep running out of options exactly where the enemy wanted them. Inside a mile, pulling hard, waiting for a tone that didn't come. Numbers don't lie, kill ratios collapse. While aircrews wrestled with tones and tactics, the scoreboard started talking in a voice nobody could ignore. Early rolling thunder numbers came in flat, then slid. Navy exchange ratios sagged from comfortable expectations to roughly 2-to-1. The Air Force, flying similar assumptions, hovered there too. On paper before the war, planners quoted double digits. Over North Vietnam, reality halved, then halved again. This wasn't a bad week, it was a slope. Stakes were brutal because ratios aren't abstractions, their names read in ready rooms. Each lost jet meant 2 aviators for Phantoms, often missing, captured, or worse. Commanders felt the pressure in terse calls from Washington, while squadron skippers stared at boards with too many red XS. If Doctrine shaped training, now the dead shaped Doctrine. Yet in the first wave of reviews, the explanations sounded familiar. Weather jamming, isolated anomalies. Crews shrugged. The trend line said otherwise. Inside the Navy and Air Force staffs, memos started to pile. One from a Fleet Air Wing flagged, systemic shortcomings in AA employment. a polite way of saying the missile myth, the road trap, and training gaps were converging. Another detailed Sparrow failure modes, track instability, fusing sensitivity, wiring faults aggravated by humidity, and a Sidewinder reliability note warned that Seeker cooling procedures were being rushed in the Marshall stack, compromising performance. None of it was news on the line. Seeing it in black and white made it harder to ignore. Pilot reports added texture the spreadsheets missed. Most engagements devolved to maneuvering fights within 5 miles. Sparrow parameters rarely available without unacceptable exposure. Winder tone unreliable against sunlit cloud. In the margins, you could read the shift in tone from confident to conditional. The language turned careful. Recommend, urge, consider. Meanwhile, across the river, North Vietnamese controllers were refining a playbook. They tightened ambush windows, timed vertical escapes, and avoided sustained fights. Their kill claims weren't inflated fairy tales. Gun, camera, film, and wreckage matched enough of them to sting. Unknown to many outside the vaults, analysts compared sortie logs to engagement outcomes. A pattern emerged. Units that snuck in more dissimilar air combat practice, ad hoc, often off the syllabus, bled less in merges. Crews who debriefed hard on geometry, not just switchology, found shots that stuck. It wasn't a miracle, it was a nudge, but it pointed somewhere different than buy better missiles. It hinted that training, not just tech, was the lever. Meanwhile, the psychological toll crept in like fog. Aircrews began to hedge on commits. You could see it in tapes. Earlier jinks, wider offsets, conservative merges. Not cowardice, calculus. When your first shot is a coin toss and the second might not come, you manage exposure. But that caution fed a loop. Fewer aggressive entries meant fewer quick kills, meant longer exposure to flak and pop-up MiGs, meant more chaos, meant fewer clean parameters. The spiral wasn't steep, but it was there. Maintenance felt it too. Line chiefs quietly shifted priorities. Racks got extra love. Seeker heads were barbied. Environmental seals reworked with field fixes. One squadron instituted a 2-missile confidence rule. If a jet logged 2 consecutive missile anomalies, it didn't fly AA escort next go. That wasn't in any directive. It was survival culture. It helped some, and it also advertised the problem. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Top-level briefs still led with system improvements, better fuses, cleaner harnesses, revised software, all good, all needed. But the memos from a few salty captains and majors said the quiet part. We are not trained to fight the fight we are in. One line repeated in variations across reports. Row negate BVR, WVR skills insufficient. That sentence was a fuse. The pivot began with a decision to measure belief, not just pilots. The Navy appointed Captain Frank Ault to conduct an air-to-air missile system capability review, comprehensive, unsparing, and oriented on results in combat, not the promises of the brochure. It wasn't about blaming the fleet. It was about putting everything, missiles, radars, tactics, syllabi, debrief methods, on the table. The brief to his team was blunt. Find what's broken and recommend what to change. While that was happening in Washington corridors, across squadrons the talk sharpened. If they won't give us a gun, give us reps. If we can't shoot BVR, teach the merge like it's our job. A few commanders protected time for 1v1 sets and demanded debriefs with tape, not ego. Those units' numbers twitched upward. Small sample size, sure, but in a war of inches, a twitch mattered. The collapse in kill ratios forced honesty. It stripped away the comfort of theory and left the shape of the actual fight. Short range, high workload, unforgiving. The question wasn't whether missiles had a future. They did. It was whether aircrews would be trained to survive long enough to use them well. The answer would come from a report that read like a mirror and a school that felt like a revolt. The Ault Report, an uncomfortable mirror. 3 floors up in the Pentagon, a quiet decision cut through the noise. Stop arguing feelings, measure the fight. Captain Frank Ault, carrier skipper turned troubleshooter, got the mandate. Not a witch hunt, an autopsy. His charter ran wide. Missiles, radars, tactics, training, maintenance, debrief culture, the whole kill chain from arming wire to after-action tape. He built a small team, part engineers, part operators, and told them the rule: combat results over brochure promises. Stakes were personal. The report would decide what squadrons taught and what aircrews brought to Hanoi next cycle. If it pointed at missiles, industry would get money. If it pointed at training, commanders would have to change habits. If it pointed at egos, rank wouldn't save reputations. Ault started where most studies don't. He listened to the line. He read mishap cards, pored over weapons write-ups, and dragged gun camera film into rooms with the lights off. Then he did the same with the labs, range data, reliability charts, test protocols. What nobody outside the vault knew at the time was how brutally simple his first conclusion landed. Missile reliability in combat wasn't what range charts claimed, because combat wasn't a range. Wiring looms chafed under G and heat. Seeker cooling procedures broke down in Marshall stacks. Fusing tolerances that passed in New Mexico failed in monsoon air. And here was the twist. The hardware wasn't the only culprit. Crews were taking bad shots, late shots, or never getting to shots because tactics and training set them up wrong. Meanwhile, something else was happening as the team mapped failure modes. They discovered the debrief habit was broken. Squadrons talked around misses, probably countermeasures, possible break lock. The words "I blew the merge" were rare, not because pilots were cowards, but because the culture didn't force the fill. Ault's people sat crews down with synchronized tapes, radar scope, cockpit audio, gun camera. They ran engagements at half speed and paused at the decision points. Where were your eyes? What contract with your wingman? What was the plan if the Sparrow hiccuped? It felt like heresy. It also felt like medicine. The report's language was cool, but you could hear the heat under it. Training syllabi overemphasized intercept switchology and underweighted maneuvering fundamentals. Tactics assumed BVR shots that rode Dennied. Radar employment didn't account for clutter and notch tactics. Weapons reliability data wasn't tracked rigorously enough to drive maintenance priorities. Debriefs lacked standardized truth tools, tape, timelines, and a common vocabulary. One line became folklore, fighting skills atrophied by faith in technology. Not a jab at engineers, a warning to aviators. Stakes tightened because Ault didn't stop at diagnosis. He wrote prescriptions. First, build a dedicated adversary program. Jets flown like the enemy, pilots trained to think like the enemy. Second, formalize a syllabus that starts at 1v1, builds to 2v2 and 2v-many, with merged discipline and energy management as the spine. Third, standardize weapons employment doctrine grounded in combat data, not optimistic envelopes. Fourth, revolutionize debrief. Every hop taped, every engagement reconstructed, rank neutral critique, no euphemisms. Fifth, create a feedback loop linking the line, maintenance, and industry. Track reliability like lives depend on it, because they do. What nobody knew at the time, he even drew a map for culture. Humility isn't a slide, it's a habit. He recommended instructor standards that rewarded clarity over charisma and insisted instructors be the best briefers and the toughest debriefers, not just the flashiest sticks. He wanted a place where a lieutenant could tell a captain, "You blew it at the merge," and the captain would nod and fix it. That runs against gravity in any military. He put it in writing anyway. Reaction was split along quiet seams. Operators in squadrons felt seen. This sounded like the fight they'd been in. Some staff officers bristled. Nobody likes a mirror when the picture hurts. Industry circled the paragraph about reliability with highlighters and slid proposals across desks. Admirals asked the real question, can we do this fast? Ault's answer came with a date. Authorize a school now, seed it at Merama, pull your best instructors off the line, and accept the short-term pain for long-term kills. While those memos moved, a small cadre started sketching the school on a hangar whiteboard. Aircraft allocation, instructors to poach, adversary paint schemes, the first 12-ride syllabus. They stole time in borrowed jets, flew dissimilar sets, and returned with debrief tapes that looked like confessionals. A phantom pilot overshot a hard-turning A4 and ate a simulated gun. He briefed why. Next sortie, he forced a two-circle rate fight and solved it. The data started to smile. The last pages of the Ault Report put the burden where it belonged, on culture. Fix the weapons, yes, but without adversary training, standardized debrief, and a syllabus that teaches angles before gadgets, the numbers won't turn. The recommendation read dry. The effect would feel like a revolt. A school that taught the knife fight the Doctrine said was dead. Quiet acceptance signed the order. Institutional defensiveness grumbled. In a Murama hangar, a renegade classroom turned on the lights. Birth of TOPGUN, a renegade classroom. They gave it a name that sounded provisional, like it might disappear if someone higher up frowned. Navy Fighter Weapons School, Murama, a borrowed hangar, a handful of jets, and a stack of Ault pages scuffed at the corners. The cadre wasn't chosen for diplomacy. They were sticks with scars, instructors who'd been bounced by A4s in the pattern and decided that was exactly the point. They didn't come to defend the brochure. They came to break bad habits. Stakes were obvious the first morning. If this worked, crews would go north with a plan that survived the merge. If it didn't, the school would become another patch, and the numbers wouldn't budge. The mission fit on a whiteboard. Teach aircrews to beat the enemy as he flew, not as the test range imagined him. That meant designing an adversary. They reached for what the fleet had. A4s for MiG-17 rhythm, T-38s and F-5s for MiG-21 snap, borrowed paint and skunked markings to erase the comfort of seeing your own service roundels. Here's where it gets crazy. Instructors trained to fly wrong on purpose. They tuned their profiles to enemy strengths. A4s showed tiny turn radar and disciplined nose control. F5s hit the merge fast, spiked a first-shot window, and vanished vertical if they missed. They built contracts for each threat. What speeds they preferred, how they forced overshoots, where they liked their gun solutions. Students didn't fight airplanes, they fought patterns. The briefings sounded like boxing. 2 circle if he's a radius bully, 1 circle if he's a rate bully, vertical only when you've stored the energy to finish. Angles beat speed wasn't a slogan here, it was homework. The syllabus started humble and mean. Ride 1. 1v1 butterfly setups, neutral merges, no missiles. Guns only, even if it was just a finger on the canopy about calling kill. Students learn to own the merge. Nose placement, lift vector discipline, no wasted pull. Ride 2 layered energy management. Fly the M chart with your spine. Feel knots as currency you spend or save. Then 2v1, then 2v2, communication clipped to bones. 2's high rate right, press I'm fast. Commit left, vertical now. By mid-syllabus, students flew intercepts only to drive merges they wanted, not because Doctrine said intercepts were the point. Meanwhile, the real revolution waited after landing. Debrief didn't start with how'd that feel. It started with tape, timelines, and truth. Instructors froze frames at the instant a student chased lag into a flat turn or yanked 3 more GS than the jet could pay back. You thought you were safe. Watch your lift vector drift. Hear your breathing. That's task saturation. Rank didn't buy a softer edit. Lieutenants called out commanders. Commanders took it. No euphemisms, no possible break lock, no maybe countermeasures. If you lost the fight at the first cross, you said so, then you said why. Culture shifted fast, because humility turned into performance. Students stopped trying to be brilliant and started trying to be disciplined. The merge became a contract with yourself. Present lateral separation, pick circle geometry, deny the other guy his best fight. You could see habits rewiring in real time. A pilot who'd once pulled to the buffet on instinct learned to hold rate a breath longer, then cash it in when the bandit blinked. A RIO who'd once babysat radar symbology learned to throw short calls that set up geometry. Slow 2, rate fight, not I don't have it. Weapons employment returned to logic, not hope. Missiles weren't banished, they were given jobs. Sparrow shots were briefed to geometry. Stable supported, time to deny the bandit his notch, with a plan for the miss. Sidewinders came off the rail when aspect gave the seeker the best look. No sun, no clutter, bandit in a steady quarter. And always the gun as a mental backstop. Drive to a pipper solution, not because you'd always fire, but because that discipline kept your nose honest. Maintenance got pulled into the classroom too. Instructors hauled line chiefs into debrief and walked them through why a specific rack quirk mattered at a specific second. The feedback loop tightened. Jets left the line with missiles students trusted because maintenance now saw the fight they were arming. Reliability wasn't a spreadsheet anymore. It was a tape with a missed shot circled in red. Graduates didn't get a magic cape. They got a contract with the fleet. Each returned to a squadron as a seed crystal, running mini-syllabi on bad weather days, dragging peers into 1v1 sets between tanker brackets, and enforcing debrief truth with tapes and timelines. Language migrated. Parameters gave way to angles. Procedure bent to plan. Ready rooms started sounding like the hangar at Murama. There was pushback. A few old hands rolled eyes at the new piety of M-talk. Some staffers grumbled about sorties spent on games. Then one cruise's air-to-air section posted numbers from over Hanoi that looked like a different war. Fewer overshoots, more first-shot kills inside row. Comms cleaner, merges owned, vertical used as a weapon instead of a panic rope. The data didn't care who liked the school. It showed up anyway. The renegade classroom had done something rare in a bureaucracy. It changed how people behaved under fear. In the tape room, you could see it. The split second between a bad habit and a better one. That's where the kill ratio turned. And graduates couldn't wait to take that discipline back into the thunderheads over the Red River. Training changes tactics, angles beat speed. Graduates came back from Murama with a different clock in their heads. Every merge had a plan before the canopy even reflected the bandits' flash. 2 engines still mattered, sure, but thrust was now just fuel for geometry. Energy maneuverability charts, once classroom wallpaper, moved into muscle memory. You could hear it in the brief. Store energy, spend angles, buy time. Don't chase speed, use it. Stakes were immediate, because over Hanoi you didn't get a second try at the first cross. The lesson was simple. Pick the fight that favors your jet and denies his. If an A4 standing in for a MiG-17 was a radius bully, you forced a 2-circle rate fight. If an F5 mimicking a MiG-21 was a rate demon in the first seconds, you stole the circle and went 1 circle to cash your nose position early. Either way, you didn't let the bandit choose for you. Action looked like this. At the fight S-on, students created deliberate lateral separation to script the merge. Nose low for knots, lift vector set early, they drove to the bubble where the Phantom's sustained rate worked and its radius penalty hurt less. Instead of yanking to buff it and bleeding everything, they eased to the sweet spot, held rate until the bandit blinked, then traded the stored energy for nose authority. The radio stayed lean. 2's high rate right press, vertical in 3. Those short calls weren't poetry. They were contracts that kept 2 brains on 1 plan. Meanwhile, something else was happening. The vertical stopped being a panic rope and started becoming a blade. The old habit, pull to the moon to escape, got replaced by a timed climb to force the bandit low and slow, then a quarter roll and down the hill re-entry with smash to spare. If the bandit followed, he paid in energy. If he didn't, you rolled back in with angles. Either way, you wrote the next move. Weapons joined the rhythm instead of interrupting it. Sparrow shots were set up by geometry, not the other way around. If the bandit tried to notch, the section split the brackets and dennied him a clean beam. The shot called had support. Wingman offset to keep the target's escape bracket dirty. Radar stabilized with minimal antenna rates. Finger poised to trigger only when the jet was steady. When the Sparrow missed, there was no freeze. The pilot was already driving the next merge to a place the Sidewinder could see. No sun, no cloud glow, quartering tail, tone stable. If neither window opened, the gun solution wasn't a surprise. It was the end point you'd been building for since the first cross. Impact showed up in micro stories. A section over Kep met a pair that tried the classic head-on snap. Pre-TOPGUN, they'd have pressed a shaky Sparrow and watched the MiGs disappear vertical. Post-TOPGUN, lead nudged 1 circle, Wingman took a high cover bracket, and the first merge ended with a quick gun snapshot at high aspect. No drama, just geometry. Another day, a MiG-17 dragged low, trying to bait a flat turn. The Phantom held rate, climbed 2 seconds longer than instinct, then rolled downhill to land a winder into clean sky. The missile didn't have to be perfect. The picture made it easy. Communication tightened because words cost knots. Graduates brought brevity that carried intent. Rate him right meant 2 circle, don't chase his nose. Drag north, cover high, told a wingman to set the trap, not just trail. Pump meant extend exactly long enough to reset energy, not flee. In the debrief, those calls became timestamps you could align to tape, reinforcing the habit. Calls shape geometry. Geometry shapes shots. Contracts extended to roles. The shooter wasn't always the hero. Sometimes the best move was to press and force a defensive turn that handed your wingman a clean picture. Ego got parked. The section's kill was the point. You can see it in tapes from that period. Lead taking the ugly merge, so 2 could drop in with a short sidewinder, or 2 passing a low percentage shot, because Lead's Sparrow would be supported in 3 more seconds. Patience turned lethal. M thinking seeped into throttle hands. Students learned to feel PS, specific excess power, without reading a chart. If they heard their breathing roughen, they knew they were pulling past what the jet could repay. If contrails feathered off the tips at the wrong time, they eased a half G to keep knots in the bank. No one briefed hero pulls anymore. They briefed paid pulls. Maintenance felt the change. When pilots described why a specific rack glitch killed a bracket plan, chiefs reordered work. Reliability climbed not because a memo said so, but because the fight demanded it. And that loop fed back into tactics. Crews now assumed their missiles would behave if they did. The impact rippled across the fleet. Squadrons with fresh grads started owning merges they used to survive. Overshoots dropped. First-pass solutions ticked up. You could measure it. Fewer long, exhausting flat spins of a fight. More quick, disciplined engagements ending with a clean call, knock it off, he's dead. Over Hanoi, the difference between almost and done was seconds. Angles turned those seconds into kills. Speed still mattered, but only when it served the plan. The turn in the numbers, post-Top Gun results. While the syllabus rewired instincts, the metric that mattered lived on greaseboards and in after-action logs. Over Hanoi, the Navy's air-to-air tally started to shift from survival math to momentum. Exchange ratios that had hovered around 2-to-1 bent upward, first 4-to-1 on some line periods, then 8-to-1 on sustained cruises, finally settling near 12-to-1 by late 1972 as the school matured and its graduates seeded the fleet. No memo could fake that curve. It showed up in gun camera film, missile expenditure reports, and fewer empty chairs in ready rooms. Stakes felt different the first time a cruise came home with a clean kill board and no air-to-air losses. Crews didn't swagger, they exhaled. The change wasn't a single magic tactic. It was 1,000 micro-decisions that now stacked in the same direction, disciplined merges, patient brackets, geometry-driven shots, and debriefs that turned mistakes into tomorrow's fixes. Confidence returned, not the blind kind that believes brochures, but the kind born from reps. Pilots strapped in knowing their plan fit the fight they were likely to face. Action looked like this. A division crossing the coast met a mixed gaggle, MiG-21's high, -17's low. Pre-Top Gun, the picture would have turned into a scramble of head-on Sparrows and vertical escapes. Post-Top Gun, Lead split the formation into 2 contracts. One section bracketed the high group, denying the notch and setting a supported Sparrow. The other section dragged the -17s into a rate fight away from flak, holding PS, refusing flat turns. The first Sparrow hit because the geometry starved the target of options. The second engagement ended with a short, clean sidewinder into blue sky. The fight lasted seconds. The debrief lasted an hour. Missile numbers told their own story. Sparrow probabilities climbed as employment tightened. Shots taken inside stable windows with section support, fewer hope-off-the-rail launches. Sidewinder success rose when seekers saw quartering tails, not sunlit clouds. Crews now treated missiles as tools with specific jobs rather than talismans. It sounds simple. In combat, simple is rare. Meanwhile, something else was happening on the ramp. Maintenance culture shifted under tactical pressure. When pilots could point to seconds on tape where a rack hiccup killed a supported bracket, chiefs prioritized fixes that mattered to the fight. Seals got replaced ahead of schedule. Cooling procedures stopped being rushed in marshal stacks. Missile crews started attending debriefs, hearing why almost didn't count. Reliability ticked up because it had faces attached to it now. Case stories made the rounds. Over Yenbai, a section lead took the ugly merge, pulling a MiG-17 into a 2-circle he could hold while his wingman stayed just high enough to pounce. Pre-Top Gun, that wingman might have chased the nose and overshot. Post-Top Gun, he waited 1 beat, rolled downhill, and put a winder into a picture the seeker couldn't misunderstand. Another day, a pair met head-on -21s that tried to snap and zoom. The RIO's call, he's beaming right, wasn't a warning, it was a plan cue. Lead bracketed, wingman held antenna rate steady, the Sparrow left with support, and the MiGs notch turned into a trap instead of an escape. Impact cascaded beyond kill tallies. Strike packages felt less exposed because escorts weren't chasing ghosts. Comms grew shorter. Tanker brackets got cleaner because merges ended faster. Even yield planning benefited. Jammers could be timed to cover the vulnerable seconds between first merge and first shot, not the entire route. Efficiency wasn't a spreadsheet metric anymore. It was fewer minutes in SAM rings, fewer pop-up surprises, better odds of everyone making the boat by sunset. Across the river, the enemy adapted because they were professionals too. Controllers shortened ambush windows and pushed head-on gun attacks with -17s to force chaos. TOPGUN influenced sections answered with pre-briefed pumps, short, disciplined extensions to reset energy and re-enter on their terms. The cat and mouse got sharper. The numbers kept favoring the mouse that now studied the cat. The Air Force watched. Its own weapons school lineage ran deep, but Vietnam's lessons demanded changes in tone and tempo. Red Flag would arrive with the same core idea, put people into honest fights with adversaries who act like adversaries, then debrief with brutal clarity. You can draw the straight line on a wall, Ault's mirror, a Murama hanger, a kill curve that bent, and a culture that finally matched the sky it was sent to. Technology follows tactics, hardware learns humility. When graduates started bending fights their way, the jets themselves began to change. Not because brochures demanded it, but because tapes showed where metal and code had to serve the new discipline. The first confession came in aluminium. The gun returned. The F-4E's internal M61 wasn't romance. It was a hard-won admission that a fighter needs a trigger that works when envelopes collapse. No pods shaking, no drag tacks at the worst moment. A pipper you could drive, a burst you could trust, and a habit that reinforced everything TOPGUN taught. Own angles, finish clean. Missiles learned humility too. Reliability became a war plan, not a hope. Sparrow evolved. AIM-72 dogfight Sparrow tightened fusing and guidance for the closing chaos crews actually faced. Engineers sat in rooms with instructors who'd freeze tapes at the second, and antenna rates spiked, and the lock wandered. That drove better stabilization, smarter look angles, and clearer symbology that didn't seduce a pilot into a shot he couldn't support. Sidewinder seekers got wiser, improved cooling, better countermeasures, gimbals and logic that handled quartering tails instead of chasing sunlit lies. The missile didn't become magic. It got honest about what it could do. Sensors got demoted in the best way, no longer masters. They became servants to the plan. Radar displays shifted from abstract art to tools that mapped the geometry pilots already intended to create. Antenna rate cues, notch warnings, and track quality gates started mirroring how a section bracketed a target. RIOs learned to call what mattered to the fight. Antenna steady, he's beaming left, hold rate. And software caught up, reducing mode gymnastics at the worst second. Even the RWR, once a background hiss, joined the timing game. A spike at the merge became a cue to pump 2 beats and re-enter clean, not a panic pull. Meanwhile, the cockpit got friendlier to human beings under G-tape-driven debriefs, exposed switch throws no one could make with a forearm trembling at 7 GS. Modes collapsed into fewer, clearer choices. Hands-on throttle and stick logic matured. Missile select, cage-uncage, radar acquisition, all under fingers, not buried on panels that demanded a head dip. Micro-latency mattered. Shaving a second off a mode change gave you degrees of nose, and degrees became kills. The merge problem did something else. It pulled the future forward. Helmet-mounted sights and high-off boresight seekers weren't born from a lab fantasy. They were answers to a tactical riddle laid bare on thousands of tapes. How do you take a shot the moment your eyes see it, not 3 seconds after your jet aligns? When a graduate could look, lock, and launch with the bandit off the nose line, the old dance of forcing perfect aspect faded. Tactics didn't vanish, they accelerated. The sight moved the weapon to the pilot's gaze. Training still put the pilot's gaze in the right place. You can watch Doctrine catching up in the language. Old checklists led with systems. New briefs led with C's decides. C. Build a picture that respects row and clutter. Decide. Pick the fight your jet wins. Shoot. Employ to geometry, not to gadget optimism. Survive. Manage exposure with short, disciplined pumps. Hardware slotted into that cadence. Data-linked contacts added context without dictating moves. Radar modes supported the bracket instead of luring a flight into chasing ghosts. Even jammer timing got tactical. Cover the vulnerable seconds between first merge and first shot, not the whole route in a blanket that taught laziness. Maintenance marched with it. Reliability no longer lived in monthly charts. It lived in lines on a debrief timeline with a crew chief's name next to them. Seals, racks, fuses, coolant, they got prioritized because the fight had a clock. Missile techs learned why a sloppy nitrogen charge ruined a quartering shot window. Avionics shops saw how a loose connector at 5 GS erased a supported Sparrow. Pride shifted from sortie counts to combat credible sorties, jets that did what the plan required. Here's a micro-story that tells the arc. A section over the Red River bracketed a pair of -21s. Leeds RIO held a stable track with antenna rates calm, wingman offset to kill the notch escape. The first Sparrow left clean, guided steady, and fuse logic tolerated a slight angle wobble because the engineers had finally tuned for fights, not parades. One bandit broke hard, the second tried to beam. Wingman didn't chase radar symbology. He drove the geometry, rolled in, and took a short-range winder with the sun nowhere near the seeker's eye. 2 shots, 2 hits, no heroics. The jet didn't make that happen. The plan did, and the hardware stopped arguing. Across the Air Force, the same gravity pulled. The F-15's big radar and long legs mattered, but the design brief carried the Vietnam scar. Bring a gun, bring fuel to fight, build a cockpit that lets a pilot work the merge and the BVR shot. The F-16 baked him thinking into its bones, rate, nose, energy, and its sensors became quiet partners. The FA-18 wired pilot-friendly HOTAS and displays that fit the Top Gun cadence. Even as sensor fusion grew in the F-35, the Syllabus never let the merge die. Fusion helps you see sooner. It doesn't absolve you from deciding well. Hardware learned humility the right way, by being forced to serve tactics written by experience, not optimism. The tape room set the spec. The sky signed off. Doctrine versus reality. Row, BVR, and the merge. The success over Hanoi didn't kill the debate, it sharpened it. In every decade since, someone stands up in a clean conference room and says, "Now we can finally fight at range." New radar, better IFF, tighter networks. On paper, the beyond visual range promise looks ironclad. Then the first page of the op order slaps on the same break. Rules of engagement. You don't fire a long stick unless you can live with who's on the other end. Row isn't a nuisance. It's the price of fighting in crowded, ambiguous air. Stakes are ugly when you get this wrong. A miss-AD at 60 miles isn't a statistic. It's a crisis that can derail a war plan. So Row keeps dragging your eyes back to the merge as a planning factor. BVR shots happen, yes, and they matter. But they live in a narrow alley of certainty. Positive ID, trusted links, clean geometry, clean spectrum. The moment a decoy blinks on or a neutral track strays into the picture, certainty bleeds out, and you close. Meanwhile, the countermeasures got clever. Stealth doesn't just hide jets, it plays with what your sensors think they see. Electronic warfare smears returns and spoofs velocities. Chaff blooms in just the right notch. Drones fly as sacrificial lambs, throwing off formation cues and tempting early shots. Even a disciplined opponent's comms can imitate your own, leaning on the human brain's bias to trust familiar rhythm. All of it makes the perfect BVR window more fragile than the brochure suggests. So the merge stays in the syllabus because it keeps showing up in life. Carrier air over dense littorals, coalition skies with mixed fleets, humanitarian corridors one turn from combat. There's always a corner of the airspace where certainty collapses into eyesight and instinct. That's where the Top Gun cadence earns its keep. See, decide, shoot, survive. Not see and shoot, see and decide. That extra verb saves careers. Human limits shape this too. G-tolerance isn't a matcher metric, it's the oxygen of decision-making. Task saturation doesn't care how many PhDs helped code the sensor fusion. Under pressure, pilots tunnel, vision narrows, hearing fades, time compresses. The only antidote is training that builds automaticity. You want the body flying the jet while the brain runs the fight. That's why the merge drills never feel optional. Under strain, you don't rise to the sophistication of your avionics. You fall to the quality of your reps. Here's a tape room moment that made Doctrine blink. A 4-ship running a clean BVR intercept in tests melted down when an adversary flight pushed a beaming maneuver under coordinated jamming. Tracks multiplied, quality degraded, and Rowe withheld the shot. Old you would press the radar game and hope. New you pumps 10 seconds, resets energy, and drags 2 adversaries into a geometry they can't jam. The first usable shot arrives not because the radar healed itself, but because the merge plan gave sensors a picture they could trust. ID remains the anchor. Even with data links, you treat every track like a liar until cross-checked. Visual ID contracts evolve, helmet cams, pod zoom, wingman confirm, yet the heart stays the same. Build layered certainty. This is why merge planning isn't cowboy talk, it's risk management. You plan to fight inside visual range so you aren't surprised there. If the BVR window opens, you'll take it. If it slams shut, you won't freeze. And the merge isn't always nose to nose. It's any moment your decision cycle runs faster than his. Sometimes that's a long offset with a cooperative target. Sometimes it's a 5-mile low-aspect drive that turns into a gun snapshot. The label matters less than the discipline. Own angles, deny his best fight, time your pumps, never trade certain survival for uncertain promise. Doctrine adapts in quiet ways. Checklists shrink at the merge. Brevity calls carry intent, not poetry. Row briefings include specific ID ladders that stack across sensors and eyeballs. Your plans become scalpel work. Cover the seconds between first detection and first decisive move, not blanket noise that trains bad habits. Even tanker brackets move, because you don't want to merge low and slow on the way out. The longer arc is humbling. Every time tech promises to erase the merge, reality finds a seam, whether row, deception, human fear. The answer isn't cynicism, it's hierarchy. Tactics first, how you'll win the geometry. Training next, how you'll do it under stress. Technology third, how tools will make your plan faster, clearer, safer. Flip that stack and you get pretty slides and ugly tapes. So the modern brief sounds familiar, just quieter. We'll take the BVR kill if we can prove it's clean, supported, and legal. If not, we'll drive to a merge we chose, with energy to spend and a plan to finish. Helmets and seekers will help, but they won't decide for us. Sensors will inform, but they won't command. Row will constrain, but it won't paralyze. And when the canopy fills with a shape instead of a symbol, the hands will do what the training taught. Lift vector on, rate where it pays, commit with patience, and shoot when the picture is earned, not hoped. From phantom to eagle to lightning, a straight line. The tape room at Murama didn't just fix a war, it rewired the next generation of airplanes. You can trace the line with a finger. It starts at a phantom canopy where pilots learn to win with angles, not faith, then runs straight into design briefs written by people who'd watched those tapes until the edges curled. Get this, the F-15's birth certificate reads like a confession from Vietnam. Bring a gun, bring fuel to fight. Bring a radar that helps you execute a plan, not drown you in modes at 7 GS. McDonnell Douglas built the Eagle around sustained rate and climb authority, not just top speed. Its M61 lived inside the nose because nobody wanted to bet a life on pods again. Big wings, big motors, and a cockpit that put HOTAS where fear lives under your fingers. The brief wasn't shoot at dots. It was arrive with options. Meanwhile, the Air Force wrote red flag into its bones, mirroring Top Gun's ugly honesty. The Eagle's early crews weren't heroes out of the box. They were students who learned to run brackets and pumps with brevity that fit the jet. A radar that could look down and track didn't erase geometry, it set it up. When the row pinched, Eagles merged by choice, held rate where PS paid, and finished with guns or heaters without losing the plot. Vietnam had taught the sequence: see, decide, shoot, survive. The Eagle enforced it with margin. Then came a different answer to the same lesson, the F-16. If the F-15 was a sledgehammer with brains, the Viper was a scalpel with afterburners. Energy maneuverability theory stopped being classroom art and became the airframe. Small, light, fly-by-wire, and designed to live right on the edge without biting its pilot, the F-16 taught a generation that you don't muscle a fight, you manage it. The bubble canopy wasn't romance, it was information. HOTAS logic wasn't convenience, it was time saved at the merge. A gun sat in the wing root, because even the most optimistic missile plan has a heartbeat where steel solves doubt. Top Gun's cadence slid easily into the Viper's hands. 2 circle when you're the rate bully. 1 circle when your lift vector buys nose authority early. Use the vertical when your PS lets you cash in later. The jet's flight control laws let pilots live at high AOA without cobras or drama, turning split-second choices into stable pictures. Missiles improved, sure, but they were still tools shaped by geometry. The Viper made that geometry cheap. Navy pragmatism built a hybrid, the FA-18. The Hornet didn't worship speed, it honored control. Big leading-edge extensions for nose, carefree handling for merge discipline, and displays that spoke in the language graduates already used, target aspect, closure cues, weapon symbology that matched the plan. Multiral by necessity, the -18 still paid its dues to the knife fight. Its gun was where it needed to be. Its radar and RWR fed a pilot who was always one breath from merge left, rate him, even on a strike night. Carrier life demanded options. Vietnam had taught what happens when you run out. Meanwhile, something else was quietly moving across the horizon, sensor fusion. The F-35 would carry more context into a cockpit than a squadron once could. But listen closely to how its instructors talk. Fusion is there to build certainty inside row and buy time to choose the fight. It doesn't skip the decide. Helmet queuing and high-off boresight missiles finally answer the Top Gun tape that froze at the moment eyes saw a shot the old rails couldn't take. Now, a look can lock and launch. But the school still drills. Don't look at the wrong thing at the wrong time. Fusion extends your brain, it doesn't replace your habits. Inside a Lightning, the old triangle, tactics, training, technology, shows up wearing new symbols. Data links paint tracks. Yield shapes the alley you'll fight in. Stealth buys the first look. Then row taps your shoulder, and the merge plan you briefed still matters. Graduates treat the helmet like a pipper that lives where they're thinking. They still set lateral separation, still choose circle geometry, still time pumps to reset PS. The difference is tempo. What took 3 moves in a Phantom takes 1.5 in a jet that can see beyond its nose without lifting a wingtip. You can hear Vietnam in the small choices. F-35 syllabi keep 1v1 and 2v2 sets alive because certainty breaks in weather and crowds. Debriefs still run on tape and timelines. Rank still buys no immunity. Weapons employment still reads, supported, stable, legal. And every new feature gets run through the Ault filter. Does it help a pilot make a better decision at the second decisions fail? Micro story. A Lightning pair escorts a mixed package near a crowded boundary. Links are hot, IDs stack clean, but a deco flight slides in with clever jamming. Shots are legal and ugly. Pre-lesson pilots might press the gadget. Post-lesson pilots pump 10 seconds, drag the picture, and re-enter on a bracket that starves the notch. 1 Hobbs, winder leaves off the helmet cue. A second shot rides a supported track. 2 splashes, no drama, tapes that look like Murama with better graphics. From Phantom to Eagle to Lightning, the straight line isn't hardware. It's humility hardwired into design. Give the pilot a gun. Give them time and tools to write the merge. Make sensors serve the plan. Never believe the brochure more than the tape. That's the inheritance from the day speed died. The next drones, AI, and human judgment. From Phantom to Lightning, the cadence stayed human. Now a new voice joins the formation, unmanned jets on the wing and algorithms in the loop. The promise sounds familiar, more sensors, more missiles, fewer risks. The question is old too. When the picture blurs and the clock compresses, who actually decides? Stakes are sharp because loyal wingmen aren't toys. They're force multipliers that can also multiply confusion. A manned lead carries the row and the blame. Off his wings, Drones with long legs and big apertures push a picture forward. Radar sweeps from angles the lead can't hold. Infrared staring from cold air where false cues don't glow as bright. They can bait a shot, beam a threat, or flood a merge with standoff missiles, while the pilot stays one layer back. Done right, they buy choices. Done sloppy, they add tracks that look like targets, timings that look like traps. Action in the squadron sounds like a rebrief of old lessons with new nouns. Contracts aren't just between lead and wingman anymore. They include a robotic number 3 that will never clear its throat on the radio. You will drag north on contact. You will break lock to protect the bracket. You will not take an unsignaled shot. The human voice stays in charge because Roe still lives in an accountable mind. Pods record, links share, but the guy with the oxygen mask carries the legal yes. Meanwhile, AI shows up in the places pilots hate to lose time. Sensor fusion, threat sorting, weapon pairing. It ranks targets by geometry, not excitement. It suggests bracket angles that starve the notch. In a perfect test cell, it even dogfights. A neural network finds a nose position humans miss and lands the digital pipper dead center. Then the lab door opens, and weather moves in, jammers hum, and the adversary does something off script, like refusing the merge to drag you toward a boundary where one mistaken shot ruins a week. The AI's confidence score drops right when your pulse climbs. Good systems don't hide that. They show the doubt and hand the choice back. Here's where it gets brittle. An algorithm trained on clean merges can overfit to hero pulls, caching energy for a snapshot that works on a sim bandit and fails against a patient one. Instructors play the tape and point. See that? He took the first look, not the best look. The fix isn't to throw out the code. It's to teach it the cadence. Pump when the numbers say you're broke. Hold rate until the geometry pays. Avoid vertical unless PS can buy you back in. In other words, train the silicon on the same truths that saved humans. Loyal wingmen change weapons timing too. Instead of one brain-juggling radar, RWR, and a Seeker symphony at 7 GS, the pilot orchestrates rolls. The drone with the big radar holds the wide look. The stealthy one sneaks a close stare. The manned jet keeps the prosecution legal. When a supported BVR shot appears, the drone can fire the first stick from the safe bracket, while the human holds a high-off boresight missile for the moment the merge arrives anyway. That division of labor makes sense only if comms are lean and contracts are clear. Fox 3 from 2, supported, from a machine translates as a data flag and a tone in the helmet, not a surprise contrail crossing your nose. Ethics and law ride shotgun. A machine can recommend, it can't own an escalation. Row ladders adapt, automated ID aids get you to likely, a crosscheck from a manned sensor gets you to certain. The last rung, shoot, stays human unless someone signs a risk the pilot has to wear. Crews learn to query the black box in plain language. Why that target? Good AI answers with geometry and confidence, not magic. Bad AI says, trust me. In this cockpit, that's a no. Debrief stretches across silicon and skin. Tapes now include model weights and decision trees plotted against timestamps. At 12:07:13, the recommender downranked target 2 because jamming spiked. The instructor pauses there. Right choice to pump, the pilot nods. The data scientist nods too. Next sortie, the model arrives a notch humbler, tuned to hesitate where humans do for a reason. Micro-stories already circulate. A lightning pair with 2 loyal wingmen approaches a crowded boundary. Links bloom with contacts. One group throws clever beams under strobes of noise. The AI marks a shot as high value, low confidence. Pre-lesson, a pilot might press, dazzled by math and a clean envelope. Post-lesson, he pumps 10 seconds, drags the adversaries away from friendlies, and re-enters on a bracket the drones hold rock solid. One unmanned shooter takes the first fox at range. The manned jet keeps Hobbs ready for the merge that comes anyway. The first missile splashes. The second shot rides a helmet cue when a bandit chooses wrong at the cross. Tapes match the plan. The timeline shows the AI's doubt handled well. The row ladder stays intact. Training adapts by stealing from Murama. Syllabi add mum-t sets, manned-unmanned teaming, where the pilot briefs not just the geometry, but the machine's job and the veto points. Debriefs remain rankless, now adding code rankless too. no deference to algorithms that can't explain themselves. The culture Top Gun built, humility over hardware, truth over ego, turns out to be exactly what keeps drones useful and AI honest. And the merge, it's still there, just wider. Sometimes the first cross happens at 40 miles between networks. Sometimes it happens at 400 feet between pilots. Either way, the cadence holds. See with help, decide with judgment, shoot with discipline, survive with a plan. The future doesn't erase the human core. It asks it to lead more voices. The human core, why skill outlasts every trend. The pattern keeps repeating because humans keep fighting. New tech arrives wrapped in promises. Friction unwraps it fast. Then the same quiet fix steps forward, training that tells the truth. Vietnam wrote that into the bones. Missiles weren't lies, they were partial answers. The missing piece was always a pilot who could manage fear, time, and geometry when the sky got loud. Top Gun's real export wasn't a tactic, it was a culture. Honest debriefs made humility useful. Instructors didn't hunt egos, they hunted errors. A lieutenant could pause the tape at the instant a captain bled knots for a dead shot, and the room learned instead of flinched. That habit outlasted airframes. You can see it on every generation's tapes, moments where training pulls a pilot away from instinct toward discipline. Micro-stories make it plain. One night on cruise, a junior pilot blew a two-circle fight into a flat, exhausting spin of turns. He survived on luck and fuel. In debrief, he stood up, pointed at his lift vector drift and said, "That's where I got scared and lied to myself." The next morning, the squadron flew that exact setup 5 times. By sunset, 3 different crews had solved it 3 different ways. Rate held, pump timed, vertical paid for. A week later, over bad terrain, one of those solutions became a clean kill. The mistake didn't vanish, it got repurposed. Discipline beat charisma. Instructors prized repeatability over brilliance. Briefs sounded boring because they worked. Build lateral, pick circle, manage PS, contract the roles, debrief with tape. When surprises came, and they always do, those habits shrank the chaos. A shouting match never fixed a merge. A precise call and a patient pump did. The triangle stayed in order. Tactics, training, technology. Tactics told you what fight to choose. Training made those choices automatic under G technology. When it showed up, had a job that supported both. Flip the order and you got the opening chapters of Vietnam. Theory first, pilots second, grave plots third. Keep the order and you got the tail end of linebacker. Pilots writing fights the gear could serve. The human piece also meant managing fear. Fear doesn't disappear in a cockpit, it moves into useful places. Graduates learn to feel it at the right second, when a shot was almost good enough, when a turn was almost sustainable, when a pump was almost long enough. That twinge became a governor, not a brake. It kept patience alive long enough for probabilities to mature into certainties. Across decades, the faces changed, the cadence didn't. Eagle drivers in the Cold War carried Vietnam's quiet voice. Don't let a clean radar picture talk you into a dirty shot. Viper pilots chased rate because they'd been taught not to chase noses. Hornet sections took multiple jets to knives-only fights and left with tapes that looked like instruction manuals. Lightning crews now brief data fusion the way Phantom crews once briefed RIO scan patterns, focused on what supports decision-making, not what flatters a system chart. Here's a small moment that says a lot. A recent graduate briefs a mixed package and points to a single line on the board. If BVR closes, we're not behind, we're ahead. That's Vietnam speaking through a new helmet. The team nods because they've run that set in the pattern 100 times. Pumps that don't look like running, brackets that don't look like panic, shots that arrive because patience and geometry made them obvious. Skill outlasts trends because it scales. It turns a new weapon into a familiar tool and bleeds hype out of the room. It anchors row, shapes yield timing, and decides when the helmet-cued shot is earned. It lets a flight lead say no to a machine's confident yes, then explain why in the debrief without anyone hiding behind rank or code. The day speed died wasn't a funeral for performance, it was a funeral for wishful thinking. What replaced it was a habit. Look hard, decide clean, execute simple, tell the truth after. That habit moved from a Murama hangar into cockpits that hadn't been built yet. It's still there, waiting at the first cross, asking the same question. Are you flying your plan or your hope? Resolution and meaning. Speed didn't disappear. The myth did. Pilots rewired the fight when they stopped trusting promises and started trusting disciplined skill. If you want the raw pages that forced this shift, the debriefs, the fixes, the uncomfortable truths, watch the next episode on the Ault Report's Buried Lines. Subscribe for more untold war stories, where real training, not hype, decides who walks away from the merge.